The spaceport was closing for the night, its metallic corridors falling silent. Under a flickering light near the docking bay, a young alien girl with wide silver eyes sat shivering against the wall. She was thin, wrapped in a torn blanket. Her strange pale skin showing faint blue veins. Every worker passed her by, some glancing, most ignoring. To them, she was just another abandoned child of the outer colonies. But to Daniel Holt, a human. Cargo pilot with a weathered jacket and a tired face. She looked like someone who had been waiting for far too long. He slowed his steps, curiosity battling with caution. She raised her head, her small voice trembling. "Please, human." "Be my dad." Daniel froze, the hum of the docking bay echoing behind them. No one had ever said something like that to him before. But before he could answer, the girl added something even stranger. "And be my mom's husband." The words hit like a punch, not in anger, but in the way they carried both fear and hope. Her eyes weren't pleading for food or coins. They were pleading for safety. For a place to belong. Daniel knelt, his voice steady but gentle. "Where's your mother?" She looked away, tears running silently down her cheeks. "They took her." The way she said they told Daniel this wasn't a simple case of a lost parent. This was danger deep, ugly danger, and he was already standing too close to walk away as footsteps echoed down the corridor. Two tall alien men with scarred faces came into view. Scanning the spaceport with cold eyes, the girl shrank back, clutching Daniel's sleeve without thinking. He pulled her close and turned down a side passage. His cargo run could wait. Something told him his life had just changed. "Do you want me to continue with part 2 now, so the suspense builds naturally?" Because this story can be structured so that each part ends on a small cliffhanger, keeping the audience hooked. You said, Part 1. The Whisper in the Dark. 700 words, calico, or interesting hunachea, or third-person style ma lek ni ha, or simple. Basic English ka, use Karna Chat GPT said. "All right, Shesad sir, here's part 1. The Whisper in the Dark, written in third-person style. Simple, basic English, around 700 words. With a strong suspense and emotional hook for the first 5 to 7 minutes so your audience stays till the end. And as you requested, I've replaced every full stop at the end of a sentence with a comma, so it's ready for your voiceover. Part 1. The Whisper in the Dark. The spaceport was almost empty now. The crowds had gone, the noise had faded, and the metallic corridors echoed with the hum of the docking systems. Dim yellow lights lined the ceiling, some flickering as if they were tired too. Daniel Holt walked slowly toward his ship, his boots clicking on the steel floor. His hands in the pockets of his worn jacket. It had been a long day of delivering cargo between dusty frontier worlds, and all he wanted was to sleep. But then he saw her. She was sitting alone in a shadowed corner near Docking Bay 47, a small, alien girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, her legs pulled close to her chest. A torn blanket wrapped around her thin body. Her skin was pale with a faint bluish glow under the lights, and her hair fell over her face in messy silver strands. Her wide eyes glimmered like pools of liquid metal, watching the ground as if she was afraid to look up. People passed by, engineers, loaders, traders, but none of them stopped. Some glanced for a second, then looked away quickly. Daniel had seen this before. The outer colonies were full of abandoned or lost alien children, but there was something different about her. Something that made him slow his steps instead of walking past. When Daniel got close enough, she lifted her head. Her voice was small and shaky, but it cut through the empty air like a knife. "Please, human, be my dad." Daniel stopped, his heart skipping a beat. He wasn't sure if he had heard her right. Before he could say anything, she spoke again, even softer this time. "And be my mom's husband." Daniel felt the words hit him deep. Not because of what they meant, but because of the way she said them with both fear and hope tangled together. This wasn't a child asking for candy or coins. This was a desperate plea for safety, for family, for someone to protect her. He knelt down slowly so he was at her eye level. His voice was careful, gentle. "Where's your mother?" Her lips trembled, and she looked away. "They took her," she whispered. The way she said they made Daniel's stomach tighten. It wasn't a simple case of a missing parent. It was something darker, something dangerous. He had been around long enough to know trouble when he heard it. A distant sound made the girl's shoulders stiffen. Footsteps, heavy and slow, echoing down the corridor. Two tall alien men came into view. Their skin rough and scarred, their clothes dark, their eyes scanning the spaceport with cold focus. Daniel saw the girl shrink back, clutching his sleeve as if her life depended on it. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He stood and moved quickly, pulling her with him into a narrow side passage between cargo crates. The shadows swallowed them as the footsteps grew louder, then paused. Daniel could hear the men speaking in low voices, their language rough and sharp. They were looking for someone, and Daniel was sure it was her. He pressed his back to the wall, keeping the girl hidden behind him. She was trembling, her fingers gripping his jacket tight. For a moment, Daniel considered just walking away. He was a cargo pilot, not a hero. Getting involved could mean losing his job or his life. But then he looked at her, at the way she was trying not to cry, at the silent terror in her eyes, and he knew he couldn't leave her. Not now, not ever. The voices moved away, fading into the distance. Daniel waited until the corridor was silent again before he spoke. "You're coming with me," he said quietly. The girl looked up, confused. "But why?" she asked, her voice breaking. Daniel didn't have an answer he could put into words. All he knew was that she had asked him to be her dad, and in that moment, he had already decided to try. He tightened his grip on her small hand and led her toward his ship. Whatever had happened to her mother, whatever danger was chasing them, he would face it, because somehow, in the flicker of a single sentence, his life had changed forever. The docking bay was quiet when Daniel led the girl toward his ship. It wasn't a fancy vessel, just an old cargo hauler with faded paint and a few dents from meteor strikes. But right now, it felt like the safest place in the galaxy for her. Her hand was so small in his, she kept glancing over her shoulder, as if expecting the scarred men to appear at any second. Daniel moved fast but careful, his eyes scanning every shadow, every corner. He had been in dangerous situations before. But this felt different. This wasn't about protecting cargo. This was about protecting a child who had no one else when they reached his ship. He unlocked the ramp and guided her inside. The warm glow of the interior lights made her stop. For a second, she stood there, taking in the control panels, the storage crates, the smell of metal and engine oil. "It's warm," she whispered, almost surprised. Daniel gave a small nod. "Warmer than the spaceport floor." She sat down on one of the padded seats, her blanket still wrapped tight around her. Daniel grabbed a bottle of water from a storage cabinet and handed it to her. She took it slowly, as if unsure if it was really for her. When she drank, her hands shook. "How long have you been alone?" Daniel asked. Her gaze dropped to the floor. "Since they took Mama." 3 nights ago. Daniel felt a knot form in his chest. "Who are they?" he asked carefully. She hesitated, biting her lip. "Hunters," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "They take people and sell them." Daniel had heard of them. Criminal gangs that roamed the outer colonies, kidnapping and trafficking both aliens and humans. They were dangerous, ruthless, and never let go of what they claimed as theirs. If they had taken her mother, they wouldn't stop until they found the girl too. "What's your name?" he asked. She looked at him for the first time without fear. "Lyra," she said. "And yours?" Daniel, he replied. But you can call me Dan if you want. Her lips twitched, almost like she wanted to smile. But then she looked toward the ramp, and her body tensed. Daniel turned his head sharply. A shadow moved outside. He quickly closed the ramp and locked it. The sound of footsteps followed. Slow and deliberate, circling the ship, Daniel motioned for Lyra to stay quiet. He grabbed the small blaster from his belt and moved toward the cockpit. Through the side view screen, he saw them, the same two scarred aliens from the corridor. Now scanning each ship in the docking bay, they were getting closer. Daniel cursed under his breath. If they searched his ship, they'd find her. He turned to Lyra. Do you trust me? She nodded without hesitation. Then I need you to hide. He led her to a hidden storage compartment beneath the floor, originally meant for smuggling high-value cargo past customs. Stay here, no matter what you hear, he said. Her eyes were wide, but she crawled inside without a word. Curling up in the shadows, he closed the panel just as the footsteps stopped right outside. A loud knock echoed through the hull. Daniel opened the side hatch halfway, leaning casually against the frame. The taller of the two aliens stepped forward, his cold eyes narrowing. Human, he said, in a deep, rough voice. We're looking for someone. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Aren't we all? The alien's lips curled in irritation. A girl, small, silver hair. Have you seen her? Daniel shrugged. Docking bays full of people. Can't keep track of every stray. The alien took a step closer, his gaze scanning the inside of the ship. Daniel's hand tightened on the blaster hidden behind the doorframe. You won't mind if we check inside, the alien said. Daniel gave a slow smile that didn't reach his eyes, actually. I would mind, the second alien growled, his hand drifting toward the weapon on his belt before it could escalate. A voice crackled over the bay's intercom. All crews prepare for security sweep, it announced. The aliens exchanged a quick look, then turned away without another word, walking off into the shadows. Daniel shut the hatch and exhaled slowly. He opened the hidden compartment, and Lyra crawled out, her face pale. Are they gone? She whispered. For now, Daniel replied. But they'll be back. She looked at him, our silver eyes shimmering in the dim light. They won't stop, you know. Until they find me. Daniel didn't answer. He already knew it, but what she said next made his decision even harder. They want me. Because of what Mama is. Daniel's eyes narrowed. And what is your mother? Lyra's voice dropped to a whisper so low he could barely hear it. She's the last of her kind, and worth more than any ship in this port. Daniel stared at Lyra. Her words echoed in his mind, the last of her kind. That explained why the hunters were after her. That explained the desperation in her eyes. It also meant trouble bigger than he had expected. He sat down across from her, his voice steady but serious. Lyra, what kind is your mother? She hesitated, looking down at her hands. You wouldn't believe me, she said softly. Try me. Daniel replied, leaning forward. Lyra took a slow breath. She's not just my mom. She's a Saravane. Daniel's eyes widened. The Saravane were a near-extinct alien race, tall, graceful beings with rare healing abilities. They were legends in old space records, said to cure sickness, mend wounds, and even slow death to slavers and criminals. A Saravane was priceless. Two governments. A Saravane was a bargaining chip, and now one was out there captured, hunted, and her child was hiding on his ship. Daniel rubbed his face. This is bad, he muttered. They won't just stop at you, Lyra. They'll hunt me too for keeping you. She met his eyes, her voice trembling. Then let me go. Maybe they'll leave you alone. Daniel shook his head sharply. Not happening. For a moment, they sat in silence. The ship's hum was the only sound. Finally, Daniel stood, moving to the cockpit. "We need to get out of here before the hunters search again," he said. Lyra followed him, clutching her blanket. "Where will we go?" Daniel glanced at her. "Somewhere they won't follow. And somewhere I can get information on your mother." He started the engines. The cargo hauler rumbled to life, the deck vibrating under their feet as the docking clamps released. Daniel guided the ship into the blackness of space, the spaceport. Lights faded behind them, replaced by the endless stretch of stars. Lyra sat in the co-pilot's seat, staring out at the view. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Daniel gave a faint smile. "Yeah. When no one's trying to kill you, they traveled in silence for a while." Daniel's mind was racing. He needed a plan. He couldn't fight the hunters head-on. They had numbers, weapons, and connections. He needed someone who could dig for information without attracting attention. He knew exactly who to call. After a few jumps through quiet trade routes, Daniel brought the ship down toward an asteroid settlement. It was a hidden smuggler's hub, a place where people came for things they didn't want on official records. The settlement was built inside the rock, lit by dim orange lamps. Ships of all shapes and sizes were docked in carved-out bays. Daniel guided his hauler to a spot near the back, far from curious eyes. "Stay close," he told Lyra as they stepped out. The air here smelled of oil, dust, and old metal. They walked through narrow tunnels until they reached a small bar with a flickering sign that read Jox's Place. Inside, the music was low. The crowd mixed traders, mercenaries, shady dealers. Behind the counter stood Jox, a broad-shouldered alien with dark scales and a grin too sharp to trust. When he saw Daniel, his grin widened. "Well, well." "Holt. Haven't seen you in months. Been busy," Daniel replied. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "I need information on a Saravan woman taken 3 nights ago." Jox's grin faded, his eyes narrowing. "That's dangerous talk," he said, glancing at Lyra. Daniel caught the look and stepped slightly in front of her. "You in or not?" Daniel asked. Jox sighed, rubbing his chin. "I'll see what I can dig up. But Holt, if the hunters are involved, you'd better be ready to run far and fast." They left the bar and returned to the ship. Lyra was quiet the whole way. When they were inside again, Daniel turned to her. "Why didn't your mother hide?" he asked. Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. "She tried. But the hunters have someone who can track us." "By our blood," Daniel frowned. That meant no matter where they went, the hunters could find them. He sat down heavily in the pilot's chair, the weight of the situation pressing on him. A sudden ping broke the silence, an incoming message. On the secure channel, it was from Jox. Daniel opened it, his eyes narrowing as he read the short text. "She's alive. Held on the Hunter's flagship, heading for Korath Station." Daniel's gut tightened. Korath Station was one of the most dangerous black market hubs in the sector. If the Hunters sold Lyra's mother there, she'd disappear forever. He turned to Lyra. "I found her," he said. Her eyes lit up with hope. But then her face fell. "You're going after them, aren't you?" Daniel nodded. She gripped his sleeve, her voice breaking. "Then I'm coming with you." Daniel hesitated. Bringing her would be dangerous, but leaving her alone would be worse. He sighed. "All right. But you follow every order I give." "No matter what," she nodded fiercely. "Deal," she said. As Daniel set the course for Korath Station, the ship's engines roared. Neither of them noticed the tiny tracking beacon pulsing red under the hull planted by one of the hunters. In the docking bay, they weren't flying toward danger alone. Danger was already coming for them. Asterisk, the stars blurred into streaks as Daniel's ship jumped through hyperspace. Lyra sat quietly in the co-pilot seat, her silver eyes fixed on the star map. Daniel was focused, checking the navigation again. Again, Korath Station was not a place you visited without a plan or without backup. But they didn't have backup. They only had each other. "Tell me about Korath," Lyra said. Breaking the silence, Daniel exhaled slowly. "It's a black market station. A floating city in the middle of nowhere. You can buy anything there, weapons, ships, people. The hunters will be there because it's where the worst of the galaxy comes to trade." Lyra's fingers tightened on the edge of her seat. "And my mother? They'll sell her there." Daniel nodded. "If we're fast, we might get to her before the sale." Neither of them knew that a tiny blinking tracker under the hull was already sending their exact position to the hunters. Far away, on a massive black cruiser, the two scarred aliens watched their screen light up. "They're coming to us," one of them said with a grin. The other cracked his knuckles. "Good. Saves us the trouble of hunting them." Hours later, Daniel's ship exited hyperspace. Korath Station appeared ahead, a massive spinning structure of steel and glass, surrounded by smaller ships docking and departing. The station glowed like a city at night, but Daniel knew its beauty was only skin deep. Inside, it was a den of danger. He brought the ship in slowly, docking at a crowded bay to blend in. "Remember?" Daniel said. Turning to Lyra, "Stay close. Don't talk to anyone. And don't look scared." She nodded, but her hands still shook slightly. They stepped out into the bay, blending with the crowd of merchants, smugglers, and mercenaries. The air smelled of spice, fuel, and something metallic like blood. Neon signs lit the corridors, advertising everything from exotic food to illegal weapon mods. Lyra stayed close to Daniel, her eyes darting nervously. Daniel knew the hunters wouldn't keep the Saravane prisoner out in the open. She'd be somewhere secure, hidden until the auction. He headed toward a narrow alley lined with closed doors and shadowed figures. One door had a symbol scratched into it, a jagged spiral. It was the mark of the Shadow Exchange, a secret network of traders who knew everything that moved through the station. Inside, a thin alien with 4 eyes and a lazy grin sat behind a desk stacked with glowing tablets, looking for someone. The alien asked, his voice slow and oily. Daniel slid a small credit chip across the desk. "I need the location of a Saravane woman recently brought in." The alien's eyes flickered with interest. "Dangerous request," he said. Daniel didn't flinch. "You want the credits or not?" The alien smirked, tapped a few keys, and the screen displayed a map. Storage Sector 9. Secured bay. Guarded. Daniel memorized the location and left quickly. But as they stepped back into the crowded corridor, Lyra froze. She had seen them, the two scarred hunters moving through the crowd toward them. "Dawn," she whispered urgently. "They're here." Daniel grabbed her hand and pulled her into a side tunnel. Weaving through narrow passages, the hunters followed, shoving people aside. Daniel ducked into a service shaft, climbing quickly. The sound of boots echoed behind them. Getting closer, he pushed Lyra ahead of him.
Okay.
The metal rungs clanging under their feet, they emerged onto a higher platform overlooking the market below. Daniel scanned for a path to Sector 9, but the hunters burst through the doorway behind them. Weapons drawn, Daniel shoved Lyra behind a crate. "Stay down," he hissed, pulling out his blaster. Blaster fire lit up the air, bolts of blue energy sparking against walls and railings. Daniel fired back, forcing the hunters to take cover. The crowd below scattered in panic. One hunter shouted into a comm, "We've got them in sight." Daniel knew they had seconds before reinforcements arrived. He spotted a maintenance door to the left and grabbed Lyra's hand. They sprinted through as blaster bolts hissed past. The door slammed shut behind them, sealing with a hiss. They were in a dark maintenance tunnel, the air thick with the smell of grease and dust. Lyra panted, trying to keep up as Daniel moved quickly through the narrow space. Finally, they reached another hatch that opened into Storage Sector 9. The room was quiet, lit by dim yellow lights. Rows of sealed cargo containers lined the walls, and at the far end, Daniel saw it, a reinforced cage, guarded by two armed men. Inside, standing tall and regal despite her chains, was a woman with the same silver hair and glowing eyes as Lyra. "Mom?" Lyra cried out before Daniel could stop her. The guards turned instantly, weapons raised. Daniel cursed under his breath, pushing Lyra back into cover. The guards shouted in an alien tongue, calling for help. The hunters would be here any second. Daniel's mind raced. He had to take out the guards, unlock the cage, and get Lyra's mother out before they were surrounded. But as he aimed his blaster, a deep voice echoed through the sector. "Well, well." The human hero, Daniel, turned. The two scarred hunters stepped into the room. Flanked by four more armed men, they were blocking the only exit. The taller one smiled coldly. "You brought the girl right to us. And now, you'll watch as we take them both." Daniel's grip tightened on his blaster. The hunters were in front of the only exit, their weapons pointed straight at him. Lyra was pressed against the wall, her eyes wide with fear. Inside the cage, her mother's glowing silver eyes locked onto Daniel's. She didn't speak, but there was something in her look, calm, strong, almost telling him, "Don't give up." The taller hunter took a step forward, his scarred face twisting into a cruel grin. "You've been a lot of trouble, human," he said. Daniel kept his aim steady. "And I'm just getting started." One of the guards near the cage barked in order, and the two armed men shifted closer to Lyra's mother. Daniel knew if he hesitated, they'd take her deeper into the station and disappear. He couldn't let that happen. Without warning, Daniel dove sideways behind a cargo crate. A volley of blaster fire erupted, bolts slamming into the metal where he'd been standing. Lyra screamed but stayed low. As Daniel had told her, he popped out from cover. Firing two quick shots, one guard dropped instantly. The other ducked but left the cage's control panel exposed. Daniel's mind worked fast. He needed to get to that panel before more reinforcements arrived. But the hunters were advancing, their heavy boots pounding against the floor. Suddenly, a loud hiss filled the room. Steam burst from a ruptured pipe overhead. Clouding the air, Daniel used the cover. Sprinting low toward the cage, the second guard spotted him too late. Daniel slammed into him, knocking his weapon away, then spun to the control panel. His fingers flew over the buttons, and the lock disengaged with a sharp click. The cage door swung open. Lyra's mother stepped out, even in chains. She moved with grace, her tall frame towering over Daniel, up close. He could see faint glowing patterns under her skin, like veins of light. "You're Sarah Vane," he breathed. Her voice was calm but urgent. "We have to move," but the steam was already clearing. The hunters saw them, and their rage burned in their eyes. "Kill him." The taller one roared. Daniel tossed the blaster to Lyra's mother. She caught it with one hand and fired with deadly accuracy, forcing the hunters back. "Lyra, stay with me," Daniel shouted, grabbing the girl's hand. The three of them ran toward the far side of the room, where a maintenance hatch sat half hidden behind crates. Blaster fire lit up the shadows as they ran, bolts slamming into walls. Daniel hit the hatch controls, and the door slid open with a grinding noise. They dove inside, the door sealing behind them. The tunnel was narrow and dim. With the sound of machinery humming around them, they moved quickly. Daniel in front, Lyra's mother behind, to guard their backs. Finally, after what felt like forever, they reached a small service room. Daniel locked the hatch and turned to face the Saravane woman. "My name's Daniel Holt," he said, catching his breath. "Your daughter asked me to be her dad. And your husband, for the first time." The Saravane woman's lips curved into the faintest smile. "She's bold," she said softly, glancing at Lyra. Lyra clung to her mother, her small hands gripping the torn fabric of her dress. "We "Can talk later," Daniel said. "Right now, we need to get you off this station." But the Seravan woman's smile faded. "They won't stop. Not until I'm dead or in chains again." Daniel shook his head. "Then we make sure it's neither." A loud boom shook the walls. The hunters had found their trail. Daniel opened a maintenance panel and started pulling wires. "What are you doing?" Lyra asked. "Overloading the door controls," he said. "When they try to open it, it'll blow." Seconds later, the hatch behind them shuddered as someone tried to force it open. Daniel grabbed Lyra's hand again. Time to go. They ran deeper into the service tunnels, the distant sounds of shouting and metal clanging echoing after them. Finally, they reached another docking bay, smaller, quieter, with only a few ships. Daniel scanned the area, spotting an older shuttle that looked like it hadn't been flown in months. "Think you can fly it?" he asked the Seravan woman. She tilted her head. "I've flown worse." They rushed aboard, Daniel sealing the hatch behind them. The engines coughed to life as she worked the controls. For a moment, Daniel thought they might actually make it out, but just as the shuttle lifted off the deck, alarms blared. A massive shadow passed over the bay, the hunter's flagship, blocking the exit over the comm. The tall hunter's voice came through, cold and mocking, "Going somewhere. Human." Daniel's jaw tightened, his mind racing for a plan. They were trapped. The hunter's ship sealing off the only escape route, and worse, the docking bay doors began to close, cutting off the view of the stars. The hunter's flagship loomed like a dark wall over the docking bay. Its armored hull blocked the only exit, and its heavy cannons were aimed directly at the shuttle. Daniel stood beside the pilot's seat, his eyes scanning the massive ship. The Seravan woman, Lyra's mother, kept her hands steady on the controls. Her face showed no fear, only focus. Lyra sat behind them, gripping her seat, her silver eyes wide, over the comm. The tall hunter's voice dripped with confidence. "You're trapped, human. Give us the girl and the woman, and we'll let you live." Daniel leaned toward the mic, his voice sharp. "Not happening." The hunter chuckled, a low, cold sound. "Then you die with them." The flagship's cannons began to glow, charging. For a shot, Daniel's mind raced. They couldn't fight a ship that size head-on. They needed another way out fast. "Is there another exit?" Daniel asked. The Seravan woman nodded slightly. "Not through the main bay. But there's a maintenance vent that leads to the outer ring." Daniel's eyes lit up. "Can this shuttle fit through it?" "Barely," she said. "And only if we can reach it before they close the inner doors." Daniel turned to Lyra. "Hold on tight," he warned. Then he looked back at her mother. "Punch it." The shuttle shot forward. But instead of heading toward the main exit, it swerved hard right. Blaster fire from the flagship streaked past them, shaking the hull. Daniel grabbed the side rail to keep his balance. "They know where we're going." Lyra shouted over the noise ahead. The narrow maintenance vent came into view, a small half-open gate barely big enough for their shuttle. But red warning lights were flashing around it, and heavy blast doors were starting to slide shut. "They're sealing it." Daniel yelled. The Seravan woman's hands moved like lightning over the controls. The shuttle's engines screamed, the hull rattling as they pushed maximum speed. Daniel could see the doors closing, the gap shrinking second by second, faster. He shouted. They dove into the vent just as the doors slammed shut behind them. The shuttle scraped the sides, sparks flying. Lyra gasped, her hands gripping the seat so hard her knuckles turned pale. Daniel glanced at her. "You okay?" She nodded quickly, though her breathing was fast. The vent was dark and tight, twisting like a snake through the station's outer structure. The walls were so close that every turn felt like they might smash into them. Daniel checked the rear scanner. The flagship wasn't following, but smaller hunter fighters were launching to intercept them. "They're coming from ahead," the Seravan woman said calmly. Daniel looked at the scanner. She was right. 3 enemy ships were. Moving to cut them off at the vent's exit, he grabbed the co-pilot controls, activating the shuttle's single forward turret. "I'll clear the way," he said. The first fighter appeared in the narrow opening ahead, its weapons firing. Daniel returned fire, the blasts shaking both ships. One shot hit home, and the fighter exploded in a burst of light. But the other? To stayed on them, weaving to avoid his shots. "We can't take too many hits," Lyra shouted. Daniel gritted his teeth. "We won't." As the vent widened into an opening toward space, Daniel aimed at a cluster of fuel canisters mounted on the wall. He fired, and the canisters erupted in a chain explosion. The blast tore through the tunnel, destroying the 2 pursuing fighters and giving them a clear path out. The shuttle burst into open space, the black of the void stretching before them. Daniel exhaled in relief, but it was short-lived. The flagship's engines roared to life behind them, and it began to turn, lining up for pursuit. "They're still on us," the Saravane woman said. Daniel quickly scanned the star map. "There's a debris field ahead. Old war wreckage," he said. "If we lose them in there, we might get a chance to jump to hyperspace." The shuttle dived toward the debris field, a massive graveyard of shattered ships, twisted metal, and drifting chunks of asteroid. The flagship followed, its fighters swarming like insects. Daniel weaved through the wreckage, the hull groaning as they scraped past rusted metal. Blaster fire lit up the shadows. One shot slammed into their wing, and the shuttle shook violently, alarms blaring. "We've lost stabilizers," the Saravane woman warned. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Can you still fly?" She nodded firmly. "Yes, but not for long." They ducked into the shadow of a massive destroyed cruiser, hiding behind its broken engines. The flagship slowed, scanning the field. "They don't see us yet," Daniel whispered. Lyra looked between them, her voice small. "Are we going to make it?" Daniel put a hand on her shoulder. "We're not giving up." Then the rear scanner beeped. Daniel's eyes widened. A hunter boarding pod had latched onto the shuttle's underbelly. "They're coming inside," he said, pulling his blaster. The Saravane woman stood, chains still around her wrists, but her eyes blazing with determination. "Then we meet them before they meet us," she said. A loud metallic clang echoed through the ship as the boarding hatch was forced open. Smoke filled the air, and the first hunter soldier stepped through. Weapon raised, Daniel fired instantly, dropping him, but more were behind. The narrow shuttle corridor became a storm of blaster fire and shouts. Daniel fought alongside the Saravane woman, protecting Lyra at all costs. Then, through the chaos, the tall hunter himself stepped onto the shuttle, his cold eyes locked on Daniel. "This ends now," he said, raising his weapon. The tall hunter filled the shuttle's narrow corridor, his scarred face twisted in a cruel smile behind him. The sound of more boots echoed as his men climbed through the boarding pod. Daniel stood in front of Lyra, blaster raised. The Saravane woman stepped forward too, her silver eyes glowing like cold fire. "You can't win," the hunter said, his voice deep and mocking. "You're outnumbered, and you're trapped." Daniel's grip tightened on his weapon. "Maybe," he said. "But you're forgetting one thing." The hunter tilted his head. "And what's that?" Daniel's eyes hardened. "You touched the wrong family." The hunter raised his weapon. But Daniel fired first. The corridor exploded into chaos. Blaster bolts lit up the space, sparks flying from the walls. The Saravane woman moved with a speed Daniel hadn't seen before, knocking two hunters off their feet with a single sweep of her chained wrists. Daniel dropped another with two quick shots, then shoved Lyra into the corner, out of the line of fire. The tall hunter advanced through the storm of blaster fire. A bolt struck his shoulder, but he barely flinched. With a roar, he lunged at Daniel. Their weapons clashed, and Daniel was slammed against the wall. Pain shot through his ribs, but he forced himself to stay standing. Blocking another strike, the Seravan woman spun toward them. But two more hunters cut her off. She fought fiercely, her chains flashing as she disarmed one and sent the other crashing into the bulkhead. Daniel headbutted the tall hunter, breaking free for a second. He aimed his blaster at point-blank range, but the hunter slapped it away, the weapon skidding across the floor. Daniel was driven back. The hunter's strength was crushing, but then a small voice cut through the noise. "Dan!" Lyra shouted, tossing him the blaster she had picked up from a fallen soldier. Daniel caught it, spun, and fired. The shot hit the hunter square in the chest, knocking him back against the wall. Smoke rose from the burn, but the hunter still wasn't down. "You think this is enough to stop me?" he growled. Daniel's breath came hard. "No. But this might be," he said. He hit the emergency decompression control on the wall. Warning sirens blared. The boarding pod's hatch blasted open, and a powerful vacuum pulled at everything. The hunters were ripped off their feet, sucked toward the opening. The Seravan woman grabbed Lyra and anchored herself to a wall rail. Daniel held on with one hand while keeping his blaster aimed with the other. The tall hunter clawed at the floor, trying to hold on, his eyes locked with Daniel's. Full of rage, "This isn't over," he shouted. Daniel fired one last time. The shot hit him square, and he was thrown out into the cold void, disappearing into the dark. The decompression system shut, sealing the hatch again. The air returned with a hiss. Daniel dropped to his knees, catching his breath. The Seravan woman moved to him, helping him stand. "You didn't have to do this," she said softly. Daniel looked at her, his voice steady. "Yes, I did." Lyra ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. "You saved us. You're really my dad now, right?" she asked, her voice trembling. Daniel smiled faintly. "If you'll have me." Lyra's eyes shone. Always, the Seravan woman watched them quietly. Then she stepped closer, her voice calm. "I don't know if humans follow the same customs, but on my world, when someone saves your life and your child's, they become part of your family." Daniel blinked. "Sounds like a good custom," she smiled. A real smile this time. "Then you are my husband, for a moment." Daniel was speechless. He had come to this station for nothing more than a cargo job. Now, somehow, he had a wife, a daughter, and a new reason to fight. The shuttle pulled free from the debris field. The Seravan woman took the pilot's seat, her movements sure and skilled. Daniel sat beside her, Lyra between them. "Where to?" she asked. Daniel looked out at the endless stars, somewhere far from hunters. "Somewhere safe." Lyra leaned her head against his arm, her voice soft. "As long as we're together, it's safe." The Seravan woman set the course. The engines roared, and the shuttle jumped into hyperspace, leaving Korath Station and the hunters behind. They didn't know what dangers lay ahead, but they knew one thing. They were no longer strangers. They were a family. And in a galaxy full of darkness, that was worth more than anything.